And this is just kind of from about here up anyway.
Okay.
All right, so we were talking today with Raymond Hines of South Carolina. The interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, begin with some background on yourself. To start with, where and when were you born?
I was born on April 6, 1944 in Wellford, South Carolina.
Okay, and what part of the state is that in?
That's in Spartanburg County, the upper part of the state, the northwest part of the state.
Okay, now did you grow up there or did you move around?
I grew up in Spartanburg.
Okay, and what was your family doing for a living when you were a kid?
My father was a city policeman in Spartanburg.
All right, and then did you finish high school?
I did, in Spartanburg High School, 1962.
Okay, and what did you do when you graduated?
I went to Spartanburg Junior College for 2 years, and then 1 year at the University of South Carolina.
All right, and did you finish college at that point?
I did not. I graduated with an associate degree from junior college, and then I went into engineering at the University of South Carolina. I have a brother-in-law who was an engineer, and I thought that would be a grand thing to do. Learned when I got there that you needed to start in engineering if you were going to be an engineer. And the other thing I learned besides how to drink beer was that I didn't want to be an engineer.
All right. So you
Ended up on academic suspension. That put me number one draft pick. I was number one on the draft list for Spartanburg County.
And when was that?
1965.
Okay. All right. And so when did you actually then? So you get drafted, and then once you get the draft notice.
I got the notice to come for a physical. Of course, I passed that. And I talked to the recruiters. I had some college. I talked to the recruiters. The only service where you could go to OCS without having a degree was the Army. So when I joined the Army, okay, and when I was down there, I did fairly well on my on the intelligence test that they did, and the recruiter for Army Security Agency came in and talked to me and talked to other guys, but she had to sign up for 4 years, and I ended up doing that. Well, you don't go to Vietnam, Army Security Agency, and you're pretty safe, and it's kind of like a sissy agency, but nevertheless, that appealed to me at the time. I did that, and then later I went to OCS in field artillery and ended up in artillery.
All right. So kind of back up here. So basically, once you got the draft notice, you kind of
Right.
weighed your options and decided to go ahead and enlist.
Yes.
And enlist with the expectation that you go to officer candidate school once you finished your regular training.
Well, there was no expectation. It was with the hope that I would go to because there was no expectation there.
Okay.
There was no guarantee either way. It was just the only service where I could,
Okay.
where there was that opportunity.
Okay.
And the other services, there was not that opportunity. So that's the one I took where there was at least a pathway there.
All right. So where did you go for basic training?
Basic training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina.
Okay.
And then I went to Fort Devens, Massachusetts for AIT, and I was a Morse Intercept Operator.
Okay. Before we get there, a lot of people these days don't really even know what goes on in basic training. So what was basic training in Fort Jackson, South Carolina like in the mid-1960s?
Oh, it's just jolly fun, I tell you what. Basic training in South Carolina. It was in December. I reported in, signed in the first day of December, and it was several days we were processing. It was the build-up for Vietnam. And they were processing people in, and we'd march around, and they got us up till we got to the basic training thing. They get us up at 4 in the morning, and we'd have to clean up the barracks, clean everything up, and fold up the mattresses and whatever else. Take our stuff in a bag. I had a little bag, and I didn't even take a coat. It hadn't been cold. I had a sweater. Turned out to be the coldest winter in South Carolina in 100 years. Then we walk around and we'd sit on our bags in a line, waiting for the mess hall to open. And then they took us down to, there was a processing unit. Today it's down from where the hospital is. But there was one big building down there where we were processed in. And then finally we get to our basic training company, and mine was on Fort Jackson Boulevard. Right now the highway goes through there. I-77 goes right through where our World War II barracks were.
Mm-hmm.
The barracks were real interesting. They were two-story World War II barracks. You could walk up to the windows and shake them. We'd put a blanket over the window to keep the draft out at night. Guys would go out training and come back in. It was better on the second floor. I was on the first floor. It was better on the second floor because heat rises. And then the heat ducts were on the ceiling anyway. They were down the middle of the things, the way they were designed. No insulation. They weren't designed for cold. They were designed for heat. And we didn't have to worry about that. I don't imagine the guys in the summertime did, but we didn't have to worry about the heat. See guys come in and stand under a light bulb to try to get warm. That's kind of a unusual thing. Anyway, it's just, all I can say is it's typical training. We just, they took raw recruits. It was a draft army. I was in basic training with draftees from Puerto Rico, Baltimore, as well as Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania was a big one, big group. And then other people, I don't know who else, I'm trying to think who else was there, not many. There were 3 or 4 guys that wanted to be pilots, helicopter pilots. One guy was Kelly. No, I won't talk about Kelly.
Okay.
Let's leave Kelly out, because Kelly was one of those guys that would tell you one thing, and then he was the student who stood out in front of the formation, and he would tell us what to do, and then the drill sergeant would show up out there and it wasn't the right thing, and Kelly would jump on us for not doing the right thing when he had just told us to do it.
Lovely.
Yeah, there are lots of Kellys, okay?
Okay.
So if you hear me solve that, that's a Kelly, that's what I'm thinking about.
All right. Now, so was it just physical training and marching and discipline and that kind of thing?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
Bayonet training, rifle range, hand-to-hand combat. I had a training accident doing hand-to-hand combat. The guy was supposed to pull his punch, and he didn't, and he hit me in the face with his hand from behind. Anyway, and my teeth went through my lip right here and came out. So I had stitches right here before I even got out of basic training. It really hasn't caused me any problem. It did get me out of going to the gas chamber because they didn't think I could put the mask on. But I got that later.
Okay. All right. And I guess it sounds like you would have had a real kind of ethnic mix of people in this training class. Yeah, because by now the military is integrated and so forth.
In today's world, we have to be careful how we think about race and say racial things, okay?
Yep.
I grew up in a racial community. I grew up in the Jim Crow era, all right? When we got to basic training, blacks were given a priority, okay? It was reverse integration. We did have a black assistant drill sergeant who was a great guy, okay? And I want to say that. And I didn't have any problem with race, but it was, everybody wasn't equal.
Okay.
And if you're white, you certainly weren't equal.
And where do the Puerto Ricans fit in?
In between, everywhere. We had Puerto Ricans from Puerto Rico, and we had Puerto Ricans from Baltimore. Baltimore, if I say it right. I can't say it right. That makes sense. Anyway, they were just there. Just it was a mix, and it was not. I really didn't have any problem with it. I don't today.
Okay.
I only pointed out because it was a fact that happened.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not that I feel badly about it. Our drill sergeant was white. Our assistant drill sergeant was black, and he was a real nice guy. He was. Don't have anything to say bad about either one of them, really.
And how easy was it for you to adjust to being in the Army?
Yeah, I don't think we had a choice. I mean, you adjusted.
Well, some people push back more than others, and some people have a harder time.
In our company, we had two guys, draftees from Pennsylvania, and they called them Flip and Flop. And one, they had a drill sergeant behind them the whole time yelling at them. And we'd go on a march, and one of them would fall down, and they'd say, don't step over him, don't step over him. But it's a different world than you have today, okay? It wasn't, they finally got out, I think. Which is what their goal was. Whether or not it was real, I can't say. They weren't in my platoon. They were in a different platoon, but they were.
All right. So how long did basic last?
2 months. I think it was 2 months.
Yeah. Becomes 8 weeks at some point. So yeah. All right. So you get through that. So you've gotten through your okay. And now
I caught a cold before I got to basic training. They were moving us around. Part of the time they had us housed in tents. We go into those old barracks, and you get there about 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and then you'd have to make your bed and shower, shave, or whatever you did, and then they'd wake you up at 4 in the morning and go through the thing, and you go through it. They finally put us in tents, and the tents were okay. They were warmer. Okay, we knew where we were, and they had coal stoves, and so hanging above the tents was a coal smoke from these little pot-bellied heaters in the tents. And I caught a cold, which I kept until I got to Fort Devens. I got to Fort Devens, and they had World War II barracks also, but those were insulated and they had heat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you're Boston now.
You're in Boston, and that's where I learned how to goof off. Also, when we got in, reported in, we were in a casual company waiting on our classes to come up. And we went to formation. We go to formation, and first day we went, it was an accident. We didn't carry overboots, so they had some people working out in the fields. We ended up on that detail, being selected for that detail. A couple of us in the same barracks did. So we went back to get our overboots and heard the truck leave that was carrying us out to where we were going to be working. And then we reported back to the acting sergeant, and he just wanted us to disappear, so he wouldn't have to. So we disappeared. And you figured out quickly that if your name wasn't down, they didn't have accountability of you, you were home free. Anyway, I say I learned how to work the system.
Okay. So what did the actual training there consist of once that starts?
Well, the training didn't happen for a while, and we were in transition for a while. Basically, we're in a casual company and doing ash and trash kinds of things. All right. Shoveling snow. First time in my life I had that much snow to shovel. We had that snowstorm. We had us out there in a fenced-in area where we couldn't just leave. You couldn't sneak off anyway. And me and this other guy, we were shoveling snow. I went one way and he went the other from the middle. We did it really nice, looked good. And then they had us doing some other stuff like trying to shovel snow where they've been running trucks in and out all day. I mean, you're not going to get that up, come on. And then they put us back out there, called us back out there to shovel that same sidewalk again, and they'd been walking on it, and it had been snowing all day, and they'd been walking on it all day, and we didn't do as good a job that day then. It's just kind of, and time came and we had to go home. I mean, what can I say? No, I think overall I did, and I think all of the people I was with, we did those things we considered important. We did well, and if we didn't consider them important, we considered it make work. We goofed off.
Okay. So you're kind of getting you're learning the system or whatever for a while.
That's right.
But at a certain point, your actual training program starts.
We had a training program. Training program consists of we were in those old barracks, World War II barracks again for the train area. We had the company area and we had the train area, and so you'd leave the company area and go to the training area, and you had the instructors and they played tapes of Morse code. Dida alpha, and you had to hit alpha. So you had your hands on the typewriter. We had a typewriter, and we had a headset on. And this thing would come over, and you had the beginning. You yell the letter that you repeated the sound and yelled the letter. Okay, teaching us to do it. So then, from there, it got. After the first phase, when you learned the alphabet, you were just listening to code and typing it at different speeds, and the speed kept getting faster.
And how long were you doing that?
Maybe 9 months, 8 or 9. It was a long time.
Now, are they adding stuff to that, or is it just constant repetition of just doing Morse code?
It was Morse code, it wasn't like they were sending you letters, anything that made sense. It was random.
Okay.
Code, because basically that was in the era of the Morse code, and everything was encrypted. Everything that you would send out would be encrypted, so it didn't make sense. You just listening and typing, and it got to be like a reflex. You were daydreaming and doing that. At the
So
same
how
time.
many hours a day would you do that?
We started 8 to about 3. If you were on, you went to 8 from. You had a lunch break, but you started at 8, I guess, probably. I think it was 8 until noon, and you come back at 1 and go till, if you were with your peer group where you should be, you went home about 3, and if you weren't, you went home about 5.
And so how well did you do with this?
I passed it.
Okay.
That's all I can say.
Did you have to stay to 5 a lot, or did you usually get out of 3?
It's not like it's not like something you actively learn. You almost passively learn this stuff. So I don't even remember.
Okay.
It's just day to day you did what you had to do.
It would seem like it's something that will just drive you crazy after a while. It's just this constant.
No, you would think it does, but it really didn't. It's kind of like music in a sense. But you're sitting there listening to it come across, and you're not actively thinking about it. It's like driving a car.
Okay.
And you can actively think about it. If you need to, you do. But most of the time, you're thinking about other things.
Okay.
In between,
Right. So what were you really being trained for? Once you have this skill, what are you going to do with it?
well, what you do, they had listening posts all over the world, and you would go sit in a listening post with a radio or 2 radios, and you would listen to to transmissions. And they're sending it by hand. This is still hand done with a Morse a key code. So the other thing is that the Morse person sending the Morse has his own signature. The way they send, you can pick out signatures. You can pick out one person from the other, and that's part of it. And a buddy of mine, we applied for OCS. A buddy from North Carolina. Anyway, I got selected for OCS and he didn't, and he went to Turkey and he was listening, and he was able to pick up the same operator on different time zone daytime and is over here, and nighttime is over there, and sometimes you use that as intel. And it was basically Army intelligence then, but that's what I did.
Okay.
But I never used it, which is probably a good thing.
All right. So when do you finish at Fort Devens then?
I reported in December of '66 to OCS.
Okay.
Let me say this too, while I was there, what they did when we applied for OCS is they put us into Delta Company, the training company. So most of the other companies were classes. I mean, the classes would be together. But the people who were applied for OCS got moved out of there into Delta Company, and we were in the honor guard. So in addition to training, we got to march in parades and do extra stuff and shine boots more and be inspected more and shine floors and stuff like that, preparing us for OCS supposedly. But the main thing was we had a little scarf instead of a thing. So, but it was called the honor guard. And
I guess while you were at Fort Devens, I mean, when you're not training, I mean, did you go off the base and go into town or do other stuff?
if you had a pass, you did. If you were allowed to pass, and most of the time we were. Town wasn't very far away. It wasn't a very big town. Air.
Okay.
And it wasn't very big, or you could go into Boston, but that was expensive. We didn't make a lot of money.
A lot of money. Okay.
Yeah. On the other, I was going to tell you too that Tommy Franks and I were PFCs together up there. If you read Frank's book, he talks about Sam Long. Sam Long was our sergeant in charge of the honor guard.
All right.
Anyway, I think he was actually a corporal, but he was God to us. He had that kind of control. And our sergeant major was named Scaglione, big Italian guy.
All right. So now you go down to OCS. That's Fort Benning, Georgia?
No, Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
Oh, Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Because you were at Artillery OCS.
That's correct.
Right. Okay. So you're at Fort Sill.
Now, having said that, and what you just said makes me think you've been doing infantry guys. And infantry guys tend to leave out the rest of us, especially artillery.
Well, I've talked to artillery guys too. I just had to back up and remember.
That's okay.
But there are more infantry than there are artillery.
Definitely more.
So,
Well, let me tell you what. When I ended up being rifted, there were more artillery guys rifted than there were infantry guys. I ended up in artillery with a gap in the year groups because of the rift. Okay? But whatever that's worth.
Yeah.
Not much.
all right.
But
So off to Fort Sill with you. Okay.
all right, we're at Fort Sill.
Fort
Got into
Sill.
Fort Sill. Let me think about that one for a minute. I can't remember how I got there. We were going. We are in, call it Robinson Barracks, but Robinson Barracks was an area, not a single barracks. At least not when I was there. And then they you started out, it was, 6 months long? You started out as, they were giving you a hard time, underclass, middle class, and upper class. They had it divided in three groups. Upperclassmen had like horseshoes on their heels, on the bottoms of their heels, so they clicked when they walked. You watched out for upperclassmen. Typical stuff. It's a lot of harassment, a lot of push-ups. You just do it, okay? I mean, you just do it and go on with life.
So could the upperclassmen tell you to do push-ups or
Yes.
things like that? Yeah.
Middle-classmen could tell you to do push-ups, and but they were really there to guide us and help us. And then you had a faculty officer who advised you and told you things. Don't think I ever got much out of him, but that's beside the point.
Did you have a lot of classroom work?
A lot. That was mostly classroom. So you had the company area and that kind of stuff, the shine your shoes and whatever. And then you had classes. And the classes were very much like classes, except our gunnery professor, I remember him throwing chalk at people when they give them the wrong answer. But other than that, it was pretty much the same. He was a good guy too. He was a heck of a guy.
So was there a lot of math and calculation for trajectories?
We had all the things. We had survey. You had to learn survey. I think that was a biggie. gunnery, where you figure where you're calculating how you do this, laying the firing battery, how you lay the battery, and the aiming circle is what we used to lay it with, and the guns, we went through the guns and the gun positions. We went through maintenance, the maintenance stuff, went through that. And at that time, the maintenance, well, didn't have a problem with that there, and they didn't have a problem. The Army at that time had a maintenance problem, and the maintenance problem was that they had a maintenance system that they'd bought into that was more work than doing the maintenance, okay? And they should have taken it all out and thrown them away and started over again. Had maintenance warrant officers who were really glorified sergeants.
Mm-hmm.
Now, today you find warrant officers throughout the military, Army, Navy, all of them I think have warrant officers. And they've changed that status. But until more modern times, you'd say warrant officer, and I said poo, okay? Except for the pilots.
Mm-hmm.
The pilots were also warrant officers. Because most of them were motor sergeants.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you about that later. But that's
Right.
after Vietnam, when I was in Germany, for instance.
Okay. All right. So.
Yeah, go ahead. Get me back on track.
Yeah, we're going. Okay. Yeah. So just kind of talk about the sort of the curriculum or whatever.
Am I okay? I'm wiggling around my chair. Just
You're fine. You're all in the shots. So
Okay.
No problem with that. Yeah. So we're kind of going through kind of the curriculum, I guess, of the Artillery OCS.
You had to learn it. You had to learn tactics. You had to learn how to give the 5-paragraph field order. You had all the artillery stuff.
Okay.
I mean, survey is a biggie. Survey is a biggie because we operated. That allowed us, being on a survey grid, allowed you to coordinate artillery from different units in different places. Right. And then the gunnery, commo, you had to learn it all. What you do if your track breaks.
You have to explain that.
Well, if the track breaks, what are you going to do?
If the track breaks.
Yeah, the track on the, if you have a mechanized vehicle and they're on tracks.
Right.
If the track breaks, and they do break sometimes, you got to go in and repair it. Somebody's got to do it. So we didn't actually do it, but we supervised it.
Right.
Stand there.
Because some of the artillery was self-propelled.
Some was.
And so that would have tracks. And did you also have vehicles that would tow guns that were tracked, or was that not something you had? Yeah.
I don't think there were any tracked vehicles other than some of the howitzers.
Right.
And then we had towed guns that were towed mostly by truck.
Mm-hmm. All right. And then did you spend time out in the field, like on a firing range, actually firing the guns?
Yes, we did. You did every position multiple times. And you were forward observer, and you were fire direction officer, and you fulfilled the role in almost every position.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So how long did the school last?
It was let me see. I graduated, started in December, and graduated on May the 29th.
Okay. So you've now been in the Army almost a year and a half at this point.
That's right.
Okay. And having completed that, now what happens to you?
Now I'm a second lieutenant. And I was selected because of my academic score. Now, you have to remember, I came from, my father was a city policeman in Spartanburg, South Carolina. Okay. We didn't really have any connections anywhere. Mm-hmm. One of my classmates had connections somewhere, and I never have figured out where or who. I think he was a spy, maybe, I don't know. But he had connections. And
so you said,
and the other thing is, I was very shy. Since then, I've kissed the Blarney Stone, and I can talk ad infinitum. But at that time, I was very shy. and so I wasn't terribly outspoken. But we were going to graduation, and as I came up to get my certificate, the officer they had brought in says, "Well, how does it feel to be the #1 academically?" That's the first time I knew I was #1 academically. I said, "No, you must be talking about Hines, this other guy."
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't, it was me. All right?
All right.
So I didn't know that, but I was
Okay.
#1 academically. And I was selected for air defense. At that time, the branches were together. Army and air defense were one branch. So I went to Fort Bliss, Texas, to learn about Homan all-the-way killer missiles,
Mm-hmm.
Hawk.
Hawk missiles. Okay.
Hawk missiles, 33 kilometers range. Anyway, and then I went to, I have to grin because I'm sitting and thinking about, you have to, in artillery, you have to shoot, move, and communicate. Those are the three things that you do, all right? In Hawk missiles, we have the same mission, shoot, move, and communicate. We could shoot. I couldn't guarantee we could communicate, and we sure couldn't move.
Mm-hmm.
All right, but that's a different story. That was in Germany afterwards. But anyway, I went to Fort Bliss, then I went to Germany.
How long were you in Fort Bliss?
2 months maybe.
Okay.
Wasn't very long.
Mm-hmm. All right, and then Germany.
In Germany, and I was in Wurzburg Germany. I was with 6th of the 52nd. I think I told you 54th, but I think it's 6th of the 52nd, Bravo Battery, 6th of the 52nd, and we were in, housing was in Wurzburg, but we were in, it was an airfield just north of there. I can't remember the name of the town. I was up there. And why I say that is because we got there and all the priority had been going to Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
This was not a division asset. This was a higher level asset.
Yeah.
And their vehicles wouldn't move. The highest you could order any parts was a 12, which meant you never got anything. No kidding. I mean, you're protecting the entire area. It's like you prioritize the local sheriff instead of the FBI.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, different story, and it's a pet peeve.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause I ended up being a motor officer and dealing with things, and it just didn't work. The other thing is when you're trying to align things, it was electronic. Everything was electronic. Everything was subject to the weather. The weather was terrible the whole time I was there. I mean, when I got there, they said, well, we had summer on Wednesday this year. So the next spring, we had a week of beautiful weather in April. It was perfect spring weather in April, and that was summer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? In Germany. Things don't work well in cold. Electronics don't work well in cold. And we had statuses, we had different statuses with the Hawks. And when you were on a 5-minute status, the highest priority we had was 5-minute status. And you had to have missiles ready to launch, lit, going in 5 minutes. You called, and 5 minutes later you had to be able to launch. And that was a tough status to maintain, especially in the middle of the night and cold. And most of the troops that you had were rejects from the other army.
Right. Well, did you have some people with technical knowledge and specialization? I mean, was there some kind of core of people who were competent, or was this just a place where people wound up?
We had people who worked on missiles. We had warrant officers that worked on the missiles, and these warrant officers were probably the best that I saw. They were definitely better than motor warrants, because motor warrants tended to be sergeants. Okay? And I don't mean to be ugly about it, that's just the way I see them. anyway, but so they knew more. The whole thing was just kind of, to make a long story short about this, when they separated the branches, they separated air defense from field artillery. In Germany, I went with field artillery. I think I was the only one, but I did. I'd had enough of them.
Well, how long were you with air defense?
2 years.
Okay. Now, what was life in Germany like outside of the job?
Well, the truth of the matter is there wasn't much outside of the job.
Okay. Did you not go off the base much, or?
I didn't get off the base. I didn't get off the air base very much at all. Okay, I was on. You had to have an officer on the site. We had a barracks down below, down at by the river, and we had the site up on the hill. And my job was up on the hill. Okay, and we had four officers. Should have had 4 officers and 2 warrant officers. So we had battery commander and an XO, and then 2 other officers. Okay, and we only had they moved people around, and we ended up with battery commander, XO, and me for a long time, and then they finally got another one. But the XO says, I got to be down here. Well, you can't leave. You're stuck on that mountaintop.
Yeah.
You got somebody's got to be there. And then the other thing would happen when they would pull night duty, but then they wanted to talk about things like what's happening with the motor stuff, and you end up leaving late. It was a nightmare for me. If you told me I had to do that again, I'd tell you what, there's no way. I'd go to Vietnam twice before I did that.
Okay. So basically, you were working and sleeping, and that was maybe about it, or not that much sleeping.
That's right. I wasn't off very much. I was off. I got off. I remember it well, but I got off for Thanksgiving, okay, in Wurzburg, Germany, because my wife was, and we were newly married. I got married right after I got out of OCS, and we went to a pet shop and bought a puppy. All right, that's why I remember I got off for Thanksgiving. I hated that.
Now, did you live on the base or off it?
I lived on the base, but it wasn't not where I stayed, not where I worked.
Yeah.
You had to go down the hill, down the river, through town, and up on the other hill. It was what's the name of the barracks? I can't remember the name of the barracks. The 3rd Division, the Rock of the Marne. What is it? 3rd Division?
Could be.
Yeah, their headquarters was over there,
Right.
and that's where our quarters were.
Okay. Now, could your wife stay with you, or did she have to be in town, or what was?
She was there. She was
Okay.
over in our apartment. Okay.
Okay. So there were basically married officers' quarters,
Yes,
or something
there
like
were.
that. Okay.
Started out on the economy. We were in upstairs of a German house for a while, and then we went into temporary quarters for a while, and then permanent quarters, and then they decided to change that particular building to NCO Quarters, and we moved again, and all this is going on at the same time, so it's kind of
Yeah. So what was life like for your wife at that point?
not very good. I wouldn't think it was very
But
good.
did she have a job, or did she?
No, she didn't have a job. She could drive, and she had a lot of free time because I wasn't there. I don't know. You know,
So how long in total was your tour in Germany that time? Was it 3 years, or did you just do?
well, I was there, and then they transferred me to 69th Group, which was also there. Okay, and I was there for. When did I leave? Let me think for a second. I was there till I got orders for Vietnam.
Okay.
And then I went back through Fort Sill for a month, probably had a month's leave,
Mhm.
and went back anyway. So several months there.
Okay. So when did you leave Germany then?
And that's what I was trying to think. It was that was 69. It was 29 May. It's
Sort of early '69?
early 69.
Okay. All right. So you go back.
Well, look, yeah. My son had to be a month old. He was born in February, so it was March of '69
Okay.
or April, around March, I think.
All right. And so now you got orders for Vietnam. So,
Yep.
so where does your wife go?
We bought a house, and during the leave time, we bought a house. She went in with her parents while they were doing that. We stayed with her parents, or my parents, back and forth. They're both in Spartanburg. And then she had the house.
Mhm.
She had a lot to deal with the house and no furniture and all that stuff. And I'm on my way to Vietnam. Yep.
All right. Now, when you went through Fort Sill, did they do anything for you to prepare you for Vietnam? Or
That was the purpose of what they were doing. And we had some things. We'd go out. They had a fire base laid out on the ranges, and a lot of the guys that were through there had been to Vietnam already. Some had, and they had comments about the way the fire bases were laid out.
Mhm.
Just took it all in. I mean, what can you say? And then we shot. And it was the first time I shot an M16. They would go out there to the range, and they had some enlisted guys out there shooting. And they left their rifles there, and we got down and shot 2 magazines full,
Mhm.
and that was it. I had been trained in basic training on the M14.
Right.
Okay, so I was familiar with that one, but the M16 I wasn't. And so then I get to Vietnam, and I'm issued an M16. And I was the senior, I was the first lieutenant, and I was a senior first lieutenant. Actually, should have made captain the day I got there, but it didn't catch up with me till later.
okay.
So anyway, I remember it well, having carrying the M16, and my M16 was dirty. I didn't know how to deal with it, didn't know how to clean it. One of the guys I was doing something, I asked him to hold it, and he cleaned it for me. He said, "Sir, this was awfully dirty." So I don't know how to, he showed it to me, showed me how, one of the 18-year-old kid, he showed me how to do it. And after that, I cleaned it every day, and I cleaned my ammunition every other day, because I didn't want it jamming.
Okay. But that part was after you got to Vietnam, right?
After I got to Vietnam.
Okay.
That's why we were in country training. Go ahead.
Okay, so we got to go back. So you have your Vietnam orientation course or whatever
Right.
at Fort Sill and,
Right.
and that
Uh-huh.
kind of thing, and you
Then I
experiment.
had to leave, and
Yeah.
then I left from, I can't remember the date, but I left from Greenville, Spartanburg, and flew to Atlanta. And in Atlanta, I changed planes, got on the right plane. There was another lieutenant, and there was a warrant officer there who were going to the same place, going to Oakland Army Airfield.
Yeah.
So it turns out the lieutenant was reporting in early. We didn't know at the time, but he was flying. We flew out there, and the plane was delayed. They were working on the plane. I remember it still because my sister lived in the Atlanta area, and she came down to the airport. And in those days, they'd let her come in.
Yeah.
She came in, and we talked, and then she'd go out, and then she'd come back in, and I kept wanting to go, and I've already committed myself psychologically. Let's just get this over with,
yeah.
And finally, we took off. We took off at 3 o'clock, and we got there at 3 o'clock. And that's the only time I've made. I don't know how fast we were flying. They said we had a tailwind, and I don't know if the speed limit's in the air or not, but I've never made that trip that fast again.
Yeah.
Okay? But I remember we left at 3 and we got there at 3, and you get the 3-hour difference. So
Right. Yeah. Because I think in that area, 3 hours from Chicago to the West Coast was good. So from Atlanta, it'd be that much better.
Right.
Okay. All right. So you go. So you're processing out of Oakland.
Yep. And we get into the airport, and we go. We're not to Oakland yet. We get out of the airport, and we go. You have to walk 2 blocks, and we saw the little Berkeley girls, don't go, all that stuff. So, but we go. And we get on a bus, and the bus takes us out there, and as you go and you see Alcatraz off in the bay out there, and we go over to Oakland and report in, and then, what's his name? Well, anyway, warrant officer and I went to the officers club and had surf and turf, came back, had to report in, I think at 8, we report in and we get seated, and we fly first to Alaska. I think it was Fairbanks. And why we went to Alaska, I have no idea.
Well, a lot of them went through Anchorage.
Maybe it's Anchorage.
That's more a little farther south, and
Maybe it's Anchorage.
Yeah, because it's the northern circle. It's shorter.
It probably was Anchorage. I don't know.
Yeah.
We didn't get out. You could see snow out there out the window, but they didn't let us out. Something went on up front, and in the first class section, I don't know who was in the first class section, but I wasn't. I know that. Anyway, we go, and then flew from there to Hawaii, and I think his name was Al. Seems like it was Al. Anyway, he kept talking about Mai Tais, and I never had a Mai Tai. So we were going to get Mai Tais in Hawaii. We got to Hawaii at 3 in the morning, and the bars were all closed, so we didn't get any Mai Tais. And we flew, I think we stopped again. I'm thinking we stopped. We either stopped on Okinawa or Guam. I can't remember which one. Guam was, I can't remember. We stopped on Okinawa or Guam, and we did get out of the aircraft, but we couldn't take pictures of the flight line because they were active. I don't know why we couldn't take pictures of the flight line, but we couldn't. And we were confined into this little area, and it was hot. And they put us back on the plane, and we went to Vietnam.
And where did you land in Vietnam?
Tonsonut.
Okay, so that's outside of Saigon. All right. What's your first impression of Vietnam when you get there?
All right. I had come from Germany and then come through the States and come through Fort Sill, and it's still springtime. I'm not really acclimatized to hot weather. You think about Germany where you can wear a coat every day and not feel uncomfortable. First thing was the heat. So they had these roll-up stairs that came in. And the first thing, they opened the doors and the heat comes in. Whoosh! That's the first thing. And then the stink. It smelled like, you don't notice it so much anymore because they built in a lot of the marshes around our beaches. It used to be like when we'd go to Myrtle Beach, you get down near the coast and you have that rotten vegetation smell. Again, they've filled in a lot of those, and they have condominiums and stuff in there now, so you don't have that smell, but that's what it was like. Okay, that's the closest I can come to describing it, but it was a distinct odor. And the other thing about that, later you got used to that and it didn't bother you. You weren't so much aware of it, but you still could smell the villages and the villages. Was a different smell. But that hit you, and instantly you were wet. We had to walk 100 meters, and have a formation 100 meters away from the plane roughly, and you thought you were going to die from breathing the hot air coming in your lungs. And I was wet, totally sweaty, in that little walking, struggling with my duffel bag. Anyway, then they put us on, I can't remember, buses. They put us on buses, and we went to,
Usually Long Binh or Benoit.
that was at, Tonsonut was right by Benoit.
Yeah.
We went to Long Binh, to the processing company. And these buses had the windows, they had grates over the windows. And the glass was mostly knocked out. They'd been in rock fights, I reckon. I don't know. Anyway, but we made it over there all right. Went to the replacement company, and they did this and they did that. Main thing we did was went into the officers club and drank beer.
Right. Now, did you have orders yet for a particular unit, or were you going to get
where I
those
got
there?
them. That's where I got them. They gave us our clothes. We had some briefings. I don't remember much what. Like I say, most of the thing was most of the officers went to the officers' club and drank beer, and it was. We got 2 pair of boots and 4 sets of uniforms. Whatever else we got, I don't remember. And then a helmet. I remember they gave me a helmet because I almost lost it. Anyway, we moved us then to the next day. They moved us to Benoit, which was the rear area for the 101st at that time. And we had P-train, in-country training, and basically it was to allow you to acclimatize to the area, but they also had some other things. They had some displays of booby traps and different things, scenarios, and about ambushes and stuff like that.
Did they teach you anything about the local culture, or how to behave there, or what to stay away from?
No.
Okay.
Don't remember it. If they did, I don't remember.
All right.
Having said that, it would have been a waste of time. Frankly, for 101st, it was a waste of time. Most of us, anyway.
Because the 101st wasn't operating in populated areas, or?
No, we weren't. Well, there were a few units that were, but I never was. Okay? I don't remember anything.
Okay.
If they did, I forgot it.
All right.
Right away.
Okay.
They taught us how to shoot the M16, and I remember that well. I remember they taught us the point shoot method. It was a NCO, this big black NCO from Fort Benning, and I don't know if he developed it, but he was the one that instructed us, and he was showing us how you shoot. Basically, M16 is a straight line. The whole thing comes back in a straight line. So all you do is, you're used to pointing things. You grab the front grip and your rifle and you point and pull the trigger. And where you're pointing is where it's going to go. It's pretty accurate. Really, for close shooting, it's very accurate. And we had to think about shooting laying down, and we did it in the daytime, we did it at night. We threw hand grenades. Don't remember much else besides that. I mean, these are the things I remember. I remember the NCO, we were out there at night, and they had a female officer, I think she was a nurse, but I wouldn't swear to it. A female officer showed up, a more senior officer, at least a major, lieutenant colonel. I don't think she had wings on, but anyway. And this guy was instructing, he was telling us, it was before it had been all men, and he was talking about, when you lay down like this, and you said you put one ball on top of the other one. And somebody went up and whispered to him, he said, you put one testicle on top of the other. Anyway, I remember that to this day.
All right. So you got your sort of orientation.
Right. Yep.
And now, where was the 101st operating at the time?
They were, at that time, they were having Hamburger Hill, I guess.
Okay. And for people who aren't aware of that kind of thing, what part of South Vietnam was that in?
Very, almost, they were in I-Cord, northern part of South Vietnam, northwestern part of South Vietnam.
Yeah. And kind of in the mountains, kind of close to the border with Laos.
Yes, very much so.
Okay. And Hamburg, a major battle, was very costly, that went on for an extended period of time. So that's going on when you get there?
I don't know if it was or not. I wasn't personally listening to news, okay?
Right.
I don't know when I mean, I just know that it was happening because I ended up being a replacement for Hamburger Hill.
Right.
That was one of the motivating factors for getting me.
Okay. So what unit of the 101st were you assigned to?
Well, we went, let me finish my story about going north. So we we fly up to Cameron Bay, I think. We fly to Cameron Bay. And then we have a truck to go up to Camp Eagle. and I had my helmet in my bag with my stuff, and it got switched with somebody else's, and then somebody had to find it. They got it switched out. Anyway, I got it switched out, got it straightened out, so I ended up with a helmet. Didn't have to go the whole year without a helmet, which is a good thing probably, although I never got hit on my head. But we flew up to we drove up from Cameron Bay to Camp Eagle.
It's kind of a long trip, isn't it? Because you've got to go over did you fly there or to Da Nang? Because Da Nang is closer to Hue Phu, where Camp Eagle is. Now you could have. You could take Highway 1. You could drive from Cameron Bay to what?
Well, I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
I know we drove for a ways, and
Yeah.
I was thinking it was Cameron Bay that we were at. Because coming back from R&R, I ended up landing at Cameron Bay and caught a flight
Mm-hmm.
up to Eagle.
Yeah.
Because we went out over I think it was I don't remember.
Well, driving from Da Nang was pretty common. Driving from Cameron Bay was a lot less common because
It
Cameron's
might have
a good
been
deal
Da
farther.
Nang, I don't know.
But anyway, a place on the coast.
We
and
drove.
you drove.
We drove in a truck, and anyway, we went up there. And so I remember spending the night there and reported to the Vardy. I don't remember.
So Divisional Artillery.
Right.
Yeah.
And they sent me out, they did whatever paperwork they were going to do, which I don't really remember. And then they sent me for a day out to Currahee on the valley floor.
Mm-hmm.
And then came back, and I was assigned to 2nd of 319th, and went up there and reported to him, and had to go out to, the colonel was out at Eagle's Nest, and I went there, and he assigned me to, I had a choice of being a forward observer or a fire direction officer. I chose being a fire direction officer. I was really not in great shape, physical shape,
Mm-hmm.
but I did that, and had to fly back, and then flew out to the battery, Bravo Battery on Birch's Garden, and I reported to Captain Davis, and Captain Scales was there already. Because I remember him telling me to go report to him.
Mm-hmm.
So Davis was the commander, but Scales was there.
And was Scales replacing Davis, or
It was a transition. Scales was going to, but usually you do that with a ceremony, and
Mm-hmm.
that hadn't happened yet.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was there, and so I was the fire direction officer, one of the fire direction officers, and J.D. Caldwell was the other one. And J.D. was a good guy. He's a real right guy, but a good guy. But he was a pot smoker.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm not going to talk about him pot smoking. He didn't do it around me, but I knew he was doing it on the fire base.
Okay.
I always thought he did his job, but I was recently talking to one of my fire direction guys this year, in fact, and he said he was never there. He's always never in the thing, because I would go on. I was there.
Mm-hmm.
He would come on, and I'd go to sleep. We were on. We had a rotating schedule, 8 on and 8 off,
Mm-hmm.
and basically you're working or you're sleeping, because you never adjust to that
Mm-hmm.
schedule. There's no spare time, anyway. But
So if the officer isn't there, do the enlisted men just do the work?
yeah. See, you had to have a fire direction officer there when they were
Mhm.
firing.
Right.
I mean, that was a requirement. You could, sometimes they would, if you had a lot of interdiction fires that you do the mission, you plot them out, and then they would just fire them
Mm-hmm.
on schedule. But other than that, especially if you had a contact mission, you had to have the officer there. He's basically saying, got his initials on every one of those rounds that goes out. And if something goes wrong, he's the one they're going to hang. Anyway, where was I? Talking about getting there.
You got there. You got out to Berchtesgaden, and so this is a fire base. This is along the, is it like along the one side of the Aschau Valley? That
Yes, on the east side of
Yeah.
Aschau. It was right across from Hamburger Hill.
Mm-hmm.
We were at about the same altitude. It was maybe a few meters, a few feet shorter, especially since they blew the top of it off.
Mm-hmm.
But we were at 1,000 feet. Currahee was in the valley floor. Eagle's Nest was at about 1,200 feet. And then airborne, I'm not sure what the altitude was for airborne. Airborne was on Tiger Mountain. And before I got there, I think May the 12th, they had been overrun.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And some of my guys were there. They had part of the guns from Bravo up there, and part of the fire direction team and the whole thing. And anyway, I went to this year to reunion, 50th reunion in Clarksville for those guys, for that base being overrun. But it happened before I got there.
Right.
I was in the battery for 4 days, and we had a sapper attack. You'll hear about Berchtesgaden being overrun, and I guess we were overrun. I think of being overrun in that you're put out of business.
Mm-hmm.
We were never put out of business. Okay, we had them in the battery area, but they were never put out of business. I'd gotten off at midnight. No, let me back up a little bit. The day before, in the afternoon the day before, I had been out down on the landing pad on Berchtesgaden.
Okay. I'm going to pause right here.
Okay. What am I going to talk about?
Okay. So you were going to tell the story for the attack on Berchtesgaden. When you were
Okay, on Berchtesgaden. I got to the battery and I reported to Captain Davis, who was the battery commander.
Yeah.
But Captain Scales was also there, and he said, report to him. And Scales says, no, report to him. Sergeant Brown was there too, the first sergeant. Anyway, and I was the fire direction officer. The other fire direction officer was J.D. Caldwell.
Right. You talked a little bit about him already. All right.
And J.D. was an experienced guy. If you read the report, I didn't realize that he had been the guy that organized the resistance and organized to Fire Base Airborne. He was the guy that organized everybody and got them going and got them responding to the attack. So I didn't know that. Never knew it till just recently. Anyway, he was the other one. And I had been on, we were working 8 on and 8 off. I had been on till midnight and I was in bed asleep. And he came back there, it's 1:30 in that general time frame. I wasn't really watching my watch. But he said, you might ought to get up. We might be being mortared. Anyway, let me back up because I didn't tell you about seeing the guys outside the wire.
Okay.
The night before, I'd been down on the VIP pad. We had 2 landing pads, and Berchtesgaden basically was kind of like that. And you had a landing pad down here where the VIPs came in, and the one over here was a supply pad where all our supplies came in. And then it kind of went up to the right, and there was another hill over there. We were on top of the mountain. We were on the very top. Halfway down between here and the VIP pad was the brigade talk, and there was also an infantry battalion talk. There was at least one. There may have been 2, but I know there was one. And over there somewhere where they had ARVN liaison people, so there were some ARVNs on the base. Anyway, I had been down, and you have to figure fire bases, there's not a lot of room. There's not a lot of places you can go. And I was down on the VIP pad looking around, and I see these two Vietnamese out there. It's the wire's here, and they're out just beyond the wire, in the wire. And they saw me looking, they waved at me, and I waved back at them. And I turned to an infantry soldier who was standing there and asked him, do we have Vietnamese working outside the wire? And we looked back around and they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
And he reported it. He did report it. And I was green. I was brand new to war.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that night, this happened. And so they, JD came back and told me to get up, and I started getting up, and I slept in my underwear. And I had everything laid out. I could get dressed in the dark. I didn't have any problem with that, getting dressed, but I dressed and came out. Before I got out, while I was dressing, excuse me, baroom, 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 excuse me. And what had happened was there was a guy who had thrown 3 satchel charges trying to get into the battery commander's end of the hooch. Our we were set up with, it was a cut through the top of the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And we had PSP on top of that and sandbags. And in our end of it, we had a Connex, one of those small Connexes that had our fire direction stuff in it, our radios, and the 2 computers set inside there, and then the charts were outside there. And then we had it blocked off except for a doorway to get through. And then we slept behind that, and then it was totally blocked off between us and the battery commander. And then everything went wild. I mean,
So sappers had gotten in the wire.
the sappers were not only in the wire; they were on. The first one that I know that was killed right up over the top of me, almost over the top of me. It's like it. If this is where I was laying, right over you is where he was killed. And when you stood up, I could reach the thing. So it was distance-wise. Straight line distance was less than 10 feet, okay, from me.
Yeah.
But he was on top. We had PSP and stuff between. But the theory is that he was coming to give us one of those satchel charges. I don't know if he was or not, but he didn't make it. DeWitt Williams was captain, and he was the Artillery Liaison Officer with the 3rd Brigade. And DeWitt was coming in at that time, had been down in the talk, and was coming back to sleep. He had been sleeping with the battery commander in his hooch. And so he was coming back there to sleep, and he saw this guy, and he shot him. He also saw another guy, because that night they were having a big poker game at the XO's hutch. Can't remember the XO's name. Tom something or other. Maybe Meyer. Not sure. Anyway, our XO. But they were having a poker game, and my chief computer was over there. The guy that the senior fire direction NCO was over there. He was coming back, but DeWitt saw him as he paused on the wall that separated us from the battery itself, on top, separated the battery. He paused on that, and DeWitt shot him through both calves. All right? So he's crawling along, and we're in the dark up by the entranceway. I've been shot. Where? I don't know. That sounds odd, but it's really true. So he's crawling in, and he falls off the door. We come out the door, and we had steps. He had a blast wall, and he had steps to go up to the right, up to the top. Well, he came along right over the door and fell in and broke his collarbone. So we get him in, and he's sitting there in one of the chairs, and he's counting his money. And I don't know how much money he made, but he was a big winner in that game. But he was a loser. I don't know if he was a loser or not, because he got shot through both calves, and he would have been back with us from those wounds, but he broke his collarbone, and that evacuated him back to the States. Okay?
All right. So that's how this thing starts. So now what happens?
We get out, we start changing the thing. We were never non-functional. Scales came into he was in the FDC, and something came over the wire, which I didn't hear, and he ran out, and at that point he had his M16 with him. He had the cover guard, the hand guard on the front of his M16 was on. He came back later and it was gone. It had been blown off. He went into the battery, over to the battery of the guns. And the first gun, I'm calling it the first gun because it's the first gun I came to, but I don't know how they had them numbered. They may have had them numbered in a different way. But the gun, when you couldn't get to the guns unless you went over the wall, but normally you went around between the gun and the commander's hooch over here. So you went around and went up. That guy, the gun crew the crew chief was a short timer. And we had started out with mortar rounds, or they thought they were mortar rounds, at least, and he had his crew in the bunker. And Scales ran them all out, because bunker's not where you want to be, and you need to be out. They had a fighting ditch and a parapet, a wall. They come out, and a guy pops up from behind there and shoots a rifle grenade, hit one guy on the head, on his helmet, and killed him. And he shot the next guy with his AK-47 with bullets, killed him, and he was shot a number of times. And this kid ran out to the fighting wall, and he laid a satchel charge in that kid's lap, and he blew his legs off. And our medic was over there treating that guy, and they were firing directly over him. Medic ended up having his eardrums blown out. He couldn't hear anything. And there's more about him later. Let's see, what did I leave out? The 3 blasts that I heard at the very beginning, Scales got out of the hut first, and then those 3 blasts, the first sergeant was trying to get out behind him, and he got blown back all 3 times. They blew away the blast wall. Blast wall was gone, but its purpose was just to keep them out of the bunker. First sergeant tore down the wall between us and came out through the fire direction center. Came out through our area. Let's see what else went on that night.
Now, did you go to the fire direction center, or were you?
I went to the fire direction center, and we went outside, and there was a guy. There was a enemy soldier that came up. There's a gun parapet here. There's just a walkway between us, but there's a wall, but there's just a walkway between us. And then over there was just, it went off down the hill, but there was a stump there still. And this soldier came up behind that stump. And he shot an RPG over our heads, which is probably a good thing, because it went over our heads and we could easily have killed us. But it, like shooting off a bottle rocket. And everybody's shooting at him, and after a few minutes, he turned around and went back. So I don't know, who knows what shape he's in, but he went back. I remember going from there to there was a bunker on that side of the base, on the east side of the base. And I remember running from where I was to there, and I felt like one of these cartoon things where you know you're running, but it's like in slow motion. That's what it felt like. And I was there for a while, and things kind of settled down, but we ended up, interesting to watch things happen. Before that, I had noted already that we had problems with people walking through the concertina wire, separating stuff off. They were passed through it.
Right.
And I tried to get guys to work on it, and you couldn't get anybody to constantly work on it unless you stood there and supervised. Anyway, afterwards, you couldn't get anybody to stop. But we got a fire mission, you got to come down here. No, I got to finish this.
Do you know how many men they lost in that attack?
I think we lost 4, and I think they lost. In our battery, I think it was 4 people, and about 11 wounded, and then we were pretty close matched overall on the fire base. There were a lot more killed on the fire base, but there was I walked down to the VIP pad. Halfway down there was a human brain laying beside the trail. Okay, looked like intact, but it's obviously not functioning. But walked down to the pad, and on the right side of the pad we had rolls of concertina wire there. It was a human body without a brain. I think that he probably got hit by a 50 caliber. The battery owned a 50 caliber. Usually the infantry used it when they were there, but the battery owned a 50 caliber. They were supposed to have turned it in, but they didn't. Changed it for 60. And they got the 60. We had 60s, but had that 50 caliber. I think that's what happened to him.
This was a Vietnamese guy that was hit.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, it was. I don't think the M60 would do that, but then you never know. There were, you looked at the people, looking at the wounds. That was my first experience looking at wounds. Looked like little dark spots, about that big, about like the end of your finger. On the other side was huge. They blew the back out. We killed at least 2 in the battery area. There may have been more than that, but I remember the 2 for sure. And then we lost 2 dead and several wounded. It seems like we lost up to 4, but I can't remember for sure right now.
Okay.
The field first sergeant was wounded. He was your field first sergeant's like he ran the guns. The XO runs the guns. The field first sergeant's his senior NCO help. So all the gun sergeants report to him, and then they've got their crew behind them. He had a satchel charge go off beside him. I think he probably lost some fingers, but he wanted to be carried down on a stretcher down to we put everybody on the VIP pad to be evacuated, and he wanted to be carried down, but the stretcher was down there already. Somebody else on it. He got mad and got up and walked down. Show them, boy. Anyway, that's the last I saw of him. We had a new one later.
Okay.
But
So now you know you're at war.
we know we're at war. Changed things too. They tell you things. They told us when we came through different. We had a medic talk to us. Medic, I think, was the one that told us this. Said that you won't believe your eyes. You won't believe your eyes. You'll check everything. You'll feel everything and check everything. And I thought when he said it, this is not going to be true. That's crazy. But when you actually happened, you didn't believe your eyes. You felt everything. Okay. Am I here?
Yeah.
You had to feel it as well, and everything stopped. Once everything stopped, you were on an adrenaline high. Your adrenaline was there. You've been up for 24 hours roughly, and you were just on an adrenaline high until it stops, and then you go to sleep. Well, after everything been stopped for 30 minutes or so, then we could get medevacs in. I think it had to be 30 minutes at least since the last round before we get a medevac in. But we got all kinds of helicopters coming in and out of that VIP pad. Everybody running over there and get off and walk around the base a little bit, get back on so they could right up there, get a write up for a medal. That's how they got their medals. You think I'm kidding, but I'm not.
No.
You think I'm kidding, but I'm not kidding. I don't know how much money we spent. If you think about, now we think about economics, I don't know how much money we spent just on helicopter fuel just to get those VIPs and get their.
Okay. So do you get an air medal for flying in a place that's a combat zone or where fighting is taking place?
No, the way.
Or is this combat infantry badge thereafter, or?
I don't know. I seriously, they probably put themselves in for a Silver Star. Okay? I'll tell you a story about that in a minute. I don't know what medals they put themselves in for. I really don't, but they came, if you got a desk job, how are you going to get a medal? All right, if you're a staff officer, how are you going to get a medal? And I'll tell you another anecdote when we're off the air about someone who's here.
All right, but in the meantime, so you have the VIPs going in and out, but the wounded get evacuated. And how much longer did you stay at that base after that event?
Several months.
Okay, so how do things change, or what comes next now? After
we had another attack later. Well, let me tell you the rest of this story. So we piled the bodies up on a cargo net, the Vietnamese bodies. I didn't take any pictures. I've got pictures of some of the Vietnamese piled up on a cargo net. I didn't take any pictures of American dead or wounded, but I did take pictures of the Vietnamese wounded, dead. Didn't take wounded, but they piled them up on a cargo net, and they hauled that thing over the jungle and dropped them. The way they thought intelligence had it, that's the way they were going to go, leave to the east of us. And I told you about the VIPs coming in. Well, we had this helicopter come in, and this guy got off. He didn't have anything on his jungle fatigues. He walked to, and didn't have a hat on. He walked to the top of the hill, which is where we were, looked around like this, turned around, went back, got in his helicopter and left. 3 months later, one of the guys got, and at that time, there was a Navy jet bombing to the east of us. I don't know what he was bombing. I mean, I have no idea. But when one of our guys got a letter from his mother, it contained a newspaper clipping, air power saves paratroopers. Yeah, right. The other thing was, today, in the way we're fighting today, they fight a lot at night. They have night vision goggles and things where you can see at night. Well, we didn't have those. We fought with our eyes, but we also had flares. So we lit the night up. We had flares from our guns, we had illumination rounds, they had flares from aircraft, you had hand flares, and from our base, the next morning, from our base all the way to the ocean, there was a line of parachutes from the flares that we had. You can see them, it's just almost like a, you think of an air show, you know, with the balloons. It's kind of like that, but these were just going to fall somewhere. It was interesting night, I'll tell you what. And I have to think, Scales, I'm glad Scales was there. I thought Scales, I had blocked the Davis out of my, I think Davis probably had a nervous breakdown, I think. But I don't know, I had blocked him out of my memory. I didn't remember him, period. Until we were talking about the battle when I was visiting with the two guys in my fire direction center. Tom Judkins and Michael Delaney, or Stump, were two of the guys in our fire direction center, and they were at this other meeting, the one from Airborne, being overrun. we were talking about this, and they were telling me, reminded me of Davis. I had to, and it still is a vague memory. It's not very clear. Not something I kept around. But Bob got a Silver Star, and then he was the battery commander, and he's now a retired 2-star general, and shows up on Fox and Friends every once in a while. Fox News. I saw him.
Yeah, I remember him, and he was something of a talking head during the Iraq War, and
Yeah, he is. I just saw him recently, like within the week, I think, on the noon thing that they do. I mean, anyway, he's one of their talking heads. So, but he deserved that Silver Star. He's one of the few that deserved the Silver Star. We had another one later. We were preparing to leave, and we had another sapper attack, which we caught in the wire. They had 2 mad minutes, one right after the other. So they had a mad minute, they reloaded, had another mad minute, and caught people coming in the wire.
okay. Now explain for general audience what a mad minute is.
Mad minutes, planned time when on command or on signal, everybody fires. They throw grenades, they fire everything for a minute, and then it stops. So at that point, I was in bed also. This was 3 in the morning, maybe. It was before 5. Most things happen about 5 in the morning. Okay, right about the time sun's fixing to come up. They want to hit right about then, and that's usually when it happens. But I was in bed, and I heard the mad minute, and I heard the second mad minute, and then I heard a machine gun. When the second one stopped, the machine gun didn't, and I was awake and ready to go. It's just conditioning. And again, we caught them out of the wire the second time. Caught them in the wire before they got into us. The first time they were already there. They were one of my guys speculated that they were already there, that they were part of the Arvin detachment, and I can't tell you they were not. Okay, I wouldn't tell you that they're not, but who knows?
So you mean for the first attack when they were already inside?
When they were in the wire.
But that, of course, was also the thing where the concertina wire wasn't in particularly good condition and so forth the first time.
No, this was internal now, not the external, because we had to run the outside. But you don't want people running around. You want to guide where they go, and so just the internal concertina wire to guide people. That wasn't in as good a shape.
Okay.
And you couldn't get them to stop. It couldn't get them to stop. Well, put up a little more concertina. It's a motivating factor, I'll tell you what.
But the second time, though, now, was the second mad minute, was the idea there that if you had the first mad minute, they might think then they could attack? I don't know who
came up with that. They would have a mad minute. They'd have a plan one, and I don't know who came up with the idea. It was the infantry company that was providing security.
Right.
And I really don't, but it caught them off guard. They had one, and they waited, and then they got caught in the second one. And after the second one was over, there was a guy in a hole that they had seen go into a foxhole. It was a listening post that we'd had down outside the wire. It was outside the wire, but it was within sight of our bunkers. And they had a listening post out there, but they'd recalled people didn't have anybody in it. It was empty. But the guys that had occupied it on that section, they had a bunker up there. They were in the bunker, and they saw this guy go in. So I was over there, and he says, "Hey, Lieutenant, we got one down here stuck in this hole." So we tried to get him to chew hoi, because you know how much Vietnamese we knew, which is about chew hoi. Anyway, so we yelled chew hoi, and nothing happens to them. So I had a M79 grenade launcher. I grabbed one from somebody. I don't remember who I got it from. I only had 3 rounds. And we had, our commo guy was named Marion. And Marion shot the M79 all night long for the whole time we was out there. Okay? So I figured Marion knows how to shoot this thing. So I told him, Marion, put a round in that hole down there. He took the M79, shot it, and if the hole's right down here, like in the parking lot, he shot like he was shooting for the ball field over there, okay? He didn't have a clue how to shoot it, except to pop. So I took it away from him. And we had but behind our Fire Direction Center, we had a radio relay from Special Forces, 2 NCOs. And one of the guys took it and shot direct fire at the hole, hit the rim. And this guy comes out, and he's not chew hoing, he's running, he's gonna go home. And he runs down and then up the other side, and he was running, and he turned around along the woods. Well, there's no shooting going on, no artillery going on. So this guy is running, and everybody is sitting there, so everybody shoots him. It's like a shooting gallery. Pow, 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 pow. Maybe 100 guys shooting at him. I don't know, a bunch. And of course, he's still trying to struggle, so he's down. And let me tell you one thing, I don't ever want to be shot by a high-powered rifle. The human body wasn't made to be shot by a high-powered rifle. It acts like a rag doll. Really. The guy was still struggling, wiggling, trying to crawl, and the SF sergeant shot him again with the M79, and he stopped, and everybody cheered. Sounds cruel, sounds inhumane, but that's kind of the stage we were at. We were kind of in the inhumane stage.
Yeah.
We were standing over there, and I was at Scales in that same area, and Scales was behind me. We were about this far apart, like you were Scales and I was standing here, and we had been having blocking fires being fired into the jungle down there. It had been going on. A round went off, a piece of shrapnel flew by my head, from this way, actually more this way, by my head, and there was a guy standing to the left over here, and it hit him flat on the leg. It was a piece of shrapnel big as my arm, about like that. And if it had hit him sideways, it would cut his leg off. And if it had hit me, it would cut my head off. That's fate. We stopped that from firing. We called a halt to that. Yeah. But you have the feeling that somebody's looking out for you. You know, you get that. The other thing you learn quickly is that no matter what you do, you become a fatalist to a point. No matter what you do, you can't protect yourself. So you do what you can do, and then you let fate take its place.
It's an effect that a lot of soldiers talk about. If they see combat, then you adjust to it in some way so you can function and do your job.
Well, part of the thing, it's like fear. When I first got over there, I was afraid, all right? And you can't live in fear. You can't function with fear. And eventually, you either adjust to it or you go crazy, I guess. I don't know. I adjusted to it. Doesn't mean you're not cautious. Doesn't mean you don't do everything you can to protect yourself. One of the things I did was make rules. I had rules about things. If I thought it was bad till I proved it wasn't bad. Okay? That's one of my rules. That's still one of my rules. If I think it's bad until I find out it's not bad. Or questionable. If it's questionable, it's bad. Yeah. Let me think what else there's to tell you about.
Well, anything else from the time that you worked at Berchtesgaden? I mean, what? Anything else from that, or are those really the main
That's
things?
pretty much the main thing. That was we didn't have. I don't think we had any wounded. If we did, it was few.
Okay. Now, did you have a lot of fire missions from there?
Oh, we fired all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I was over there while we were on Berchtesgaden. We fired the 1 millionth round. Before I left, we fired the 2 millionth round.
Just from that battery?
No,
or in Vietnam.
It probably was in Vietnam. I don't know what. It was in Vietnam. The 2 millionth round. Yeah. But that was. I mean, that's a lot of territory. If you think of it, it's a lot of territory, but that's a lot of bullets too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We fired a lot. We did.
Okay. And then at what point do you leave that, or where do you go next?
One of the projects they had, of course, they had the Highway 1 that the Navy, the Seabees built. Seabees built Highway 1 along the coast, just outside Camp Evans, and went north, I guess all the way, I don't know where all it went, to Saigon at least.
Well, the original Highway 1 goes all the way back to the French. The Seabees probably improved it.
Well, they paved it. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, they paved Highway 1. So the Army engineers had a project where we were going to keep the Ashaw Valley open year round, even during the monsoon, and they paved a road out there. Okay. And they built a fire base where the road entered the valley. We had some congressmen come over. Had a ceremony, had this congressman, and one of them hops in a Jeep and they take off down the road. That was a hot incident. I mean, you were listening on the radio, he's not here, he's on the road, so this wasn't a safe area. This was, in Vietnam, the only place you could count on being safe was what you could see and control with your M16. All right? That was what you owned, nothing more. And it was hard to get that point across to people. But this guy made the trip, and he got through. But it rained one time, and it washed out in 5 places. And they decided that it wasn't feasible to try to keep it open. They also made a base out there. They were going to move. They moved from Eagle's Nest down to this new base. I can't remember the name of it right now. Anyway, I'll think of the name of it, but I can't remember right now. But it was on a mountain, but it was much smaller mountains where the road came out, so they could actually get vehicle traffic to that base. And the other thing that happened is the monsoon was beginning, building up to the monsoon, the canopy comes down somewhat, and jungle rats went up the mountain. Jungle rats invaded Eagle's Nest. When I was in on Berchtesgaden, we built bunks out of ammo boxes. Put 4 ammo boxes together to make a bunk, and we had another one. So I was slept on the bottom, and the other fire direction officer, slept on top. An old super rat would come down the wall, the dirt wall. I'd be asleep. He'd jump, hit on me, and bounce off to the other wall. So you're laying there at night, and all of a sudden somebody jumps on you, and you're awake, and this is not a good time. So I finally got a big trap, and they sent me a big trap, and I caught Super Mouse. Nice coat. I was thinking that sure would be a nice. I've had a bunch of those. I could make me a rat coat, get me one of those hats with big mirrors on it, and be a pimp in West Coast.
Well, was there only one of them?
There was where we were. They had one. They moved us off though. They moved us off there. They couldn't keep us resupplied, and so we went to Fire Base Blaze, And in Blaze, I remember going swimming. There was a stream there, and swimming in the river and bathing for about 3 days. And then they moved us down to Fire Base Fury, which is farther south. And Fury was it's the only time I came across punji pits. They were punji pits with the bamboo spikes in them. There hadn't been war down there. I mean, it had been occupied at some point. I don't know who, but not while I was there. One thing that had happened, they'd had the infantry patrol in there. Somebody had been wounded, and they called in a medevac. The medevac didn't come in, but another helicopter did, and he had them throw smoke, and the NVA also threw smoke, and he went in on the wrong smoke.
Oh.
Even though they were telling him that's the wrong smoke, he went in and got shot down. And there were the remains of that helicopter. It wasn't right on the base, it was just off it, but you could see it. So you're awake in the morning. Every morning you wake up and you're outside waiting on somebody to stick their head up, right? Before dawn, at dawn, and then the howler monkeys come in. Yes, yes. So you're already tense, you're already tight, and the howler monkeys start making that racket. Golly dog. They howl in the evening and howl, but they really howl in the morning, waking up. Oh. It's the only time I heard howler monkeys. Then they moved us from there to, there was a place where they were going to put a fire base, and the first of the 506 was doing it sometime in June, I think, of '69, and the battalion commander was killed, and they put us over there. And I think at that point they put us over there to be bait battery. I always thought they did, but turned out that's when Ho Chi Minh died. When Ho Chi Minh died, they called a truce, a unilateral ceasefire, which they honored. They didn't do for 3 days. They didn't bother us, and then they moved us from there to Hamburger Hill, and nothing happened on Hamburger Hill either. It was just blown off the top of the mountain.
So when do you think you were there?
I can't tell you exactly.
Okay, because it can't be during the monsoon season.
No, it wasn't, because but they were worried about the monsoon coming in.
Okay.
But, and there's 2 monsoons in the north. I don't know about the south, but there are 2 monsoons. Anyway, all the thing I remember is it was Sunday because the 2 chaplains came out and had services on Hamburger Hill. And then they moved us from there back to Evans. We were at Evans for a while, and then we had to build up and went to the DMZ. We drove up and were lifted onto Fire Base Sandy. Well, Marines called it Sandy. The 101st renamed it Scotch. And we were up there. The battery commander changed. Scales' time was up, and there was somebody had extended to get command of the battery, and I outranked him because I was already a captain. So they moved me then to the assistant S3, which I went back to my lock and worked there.
Okay, now explain what an S3 is.
Operations. So basically, we had an S3 who dealt with operations as a major, and several captains that were assistant S3s. And what we did is I assigned fires. Okay, I cleared fires. Was sure everybody was doing what they were supposed to be doing. Monitored monitored what they were doing, checking their work if necessary, and following the missions. So that's basically what I did. I was the one that did that. You monitored everything, really, but when you'd hear the things come in, if there was any question about anything, sometimes when the way that the artillery, the way they had it set up to work, there was a lot of safety involved. So the battery, you've got, at least when I was there, we had a computer, guy doing the calculations, and you had the fire direction officer, and the fire direction officer is checking the work of the other one, excuse me. Go away. I don't want to talk to you. It's a robocall, I guarantee you.
All right.
Anyway, and while that's going on, you're sending the computer is a person, not a machine.
Yeah.
But you send it to the battalion, and battalion checks it. And y'all, if there's any disagreement, you work that out before anything's ever fired. And then if there's any problem with it, or if you have to trust your people, but you also check on them.
Yeah.
Okay. So that goes on too. Anyway, that's what I did.
Okay. And was that sort of the last part of your tour, was doing that?
No, it turned out not to be. I did that, and then I was, I went on R&R at Christmas, and came back New Year's Eve, and on New Year's Day I was assigned to be the liaison officer for 2nd of the 506. And that's how I got into the Ripcord. I wasn't really at Ripcord, but I was in the transition into Ripcord. So I can tell you a lot about what happened there.
All right, because Ripcord itself, I mean, they're trying to establish it as early as March of 1970, and so there's several. They don't actually do it until in April.
We didn't try to establish it in March. I mean, but they may tell you that they were trying to establish it in March. Let me tell you what happened.
Okay.
So we had Colonel Crowell as the battalion commander, and we had Colonel Crowell as the battalion commander. Major Cronigswell was the infantry S3. Okay, and I was the artillery liaison officer, and then we had to transition from Colonel Crowell to Colonel Lucas. All right, so. And then we had to change the command, and Lucas was in charge. So, just in the transition, we go out to, that we're putting 3 companies of infantry in to the west of Ripcord. And at that time, on my map, I didn't have it listed as Ripcord. I had it listed as Carroll. And I talked to Chuck Hawkins. He says, well, no, I'm sorry. Talked to somebody else. And they said, well, Carroll was up here in the north, and it was a Marine fire base. That's true. I was on it. I saw it. I know about it. But I think the Marines named every other fire base they had Carroll. All right, and they didn't stay named because they changed it. It was like we went on Sandy, and they changed it to Scotch. One was Scotch and one was soda, and we were on Scotch. Anyway, Carroll. This thing was named Carroll, so there were more than one Carroll. I understand that, and I had it still on my map as Carroll, but later, after we got there, they changed it to Ripcord. Okay? So, don't want to say anything bad. I think about what I'm saying, so I don't offend West Point officers, because they have a way of thinking that's not mine. West Point officers, for the most part, are very good and very effective, and most of the generals are West Point officers. But going to West Point to make you any better than anybody else. They do take care of each other better, but it does ensure a way of thinking. Many officers, many Army people, that was another thing I was not good at. You're going this way, and that's the way we're going, and that's it. That'll get rid of you totally, I hope. Anyway, and then you go this way. And that's the only way you can go. And if this way's the way to go anyway, So we get into that about Carroll Ripcord. We're out there anyway. We're going out there, and one of the missions that we had was there's a river. Ripcords up here. There's a mountaintop going here. There's a stream here. And supposedly that stream had something in it would make people sick. Supposedly. And then the stream. And we were going. That was one of the reasons for putting people in out there. So they had 3 companies they were going to put in. Well, we had a good landing zone at the top and the bottom, but not in the middle. And I'm sitting in. You had the bench seat in the Huey, and I'm sitting in the left door. Colonel Lucas is sitting in the middle, and Colonel Kroll's sitting in the right door. And normally it would have been the S3 in the middle, but he didn't even go because we were already more or less full. He'd had to sit in a jump seat, or I would have, or something. Anyway, so we go, and Colonel Kroll says, we'll call the Air Force and get them to bomb it and make it bigger. Well, that didn't happen. Okay, didn't happen. March the 12th. March the 12th. So we've got troops in the air. We go in and we try to get in. You can get in, but you got to hover in, which is not what you want to have to worry about. You didn't have the glide path. Okay, there was a hole there, but you couldn't get into it. So we put those alternate was to put them on Carroll, which became Ripcord.
Right.
Put them on there, and we got mortared. We got run off. A couple of people killed, and evacuate people and start over again. So then there was also an Arvin insertion at the same time, and that one they found some intelligence and Arvins don't hardly go together, but that's what they found, intelligence. Anyway, so we make a free fire zone, and you had to do arc lights and stuff like that. For an arc light, you had to clear an area 3 miles wide and 5 miles long, and then you could call it an arc light on it, B-52 strike. But that and anything else that came up. So the other thing happened was the weather came in. So the weather didn't cooperate with us. So instead of being 5 days, it was like 2 weeks.
Yeah, because I think April 1st was the second attempt.
April 1st was the second time. And so April 1st, we put troops in. They also have planned by this time they've decided they're going to make this a fire base. So they've got, and the TOC's going to go in. And so they've got advanced party for the TOC, Major Laws in one of the last two helicopters. Last two helicopters were ash and trash. They were people going in, the artillery forward party, and the TOC forward party, and then the rest of it was the insertion of the company. And they go in and we're mortared again. In fact, the troops. So here's Ripcord, and down the ridge line is Cockabo Ridge, runs up to the same way. The pilots reported troops in the open moving up along Cockabo Ridge toward Ripcord. Okay, now you're in the middle of a big insertion, and they had a proper artillery preparation. I planned the artillery prep. The problem was it was just too big. I mean, it was too, and I couldn't kill all the mortars. And before we had a few places where they could shoot a mortar from. Now they had a lot of places they could shoot a mortar from. You know, you just opened the canopy up. So we did them a favor in doing that. Anyway, that was a bad day. They were mortared. some orders.
Yeah. And
I
so they,
lost a lieutenant, a forward observer. That's another sad story. This kid was waiting to hear. He was waiting to hear about his, I think his third child.
Mhm.
It was third child, one of his children. He had a child ready, about to pop out. I don't
Mhm.
know. Waiting to hear about it. He's on the ground. I'm talking to him from the air. I told him to be safe, get in a safe place, but where you can see, but in a safe place. The last helicopter coming in had Ben King, Captain Ben King, Charlie Battery Commander, 2nd of 319th. Ben King made him move to where he could see better, but he was also exposed and he got blown up with a
Mhm.
mortar, blown in half. I didn't know that until months later, which is probably a good thing because I'm not in jail.
Mhm.
I don't think I could have gotten away with shooting with everybody looking and claim self-defense. I don't know.
Yeah, that's tough.
I don't mean to. Don't put that in there. God knows. Edit that out because that's not worth saying. That's the way I felt. But
Yeah.
Ben King. I don't want to talk about Ben
Okay.
King.
No. Okay. So, and then basically, then the company that lands walks off that night. They leave.
Carrying the body.
Mm-hmm.
Carrying bodies.
Yeah.
More than one. Yes. And they go over to the other hill, I don't remember, the hill to the southeast.
May have been 1,000 at that point, or.
I think it was that 1,000. I think that's where it was. I'm pretty sure that's where they went. And then that night, the recon platoon had just changed position, changed commanders.
Mm-hmm.
Wilson, this kid Wilson, I don't remember his first name. Teenager had been the recon platoon leader. All right,
Mm-hmm.
and he did well. He was a good platoon leader. Operated well alone. He was anyway. This other guy Wilson, who was new to that. I mean, he wasn't new to the company. He had been there for a while, but he took over the recon platoon, and he was talking about he had been given orders by Colonel Lucas to go sneak and peek on Ripcord. That's a stupid thing to do. You just got your ass run off, and you're going to send some people sneak and peek back over there? I'm sorry, but that's my opinion. And Wilson thought he was going to be killed, and he was killed. I mean, it's like a death sentence.
Mm-hmm.
That always didn't make. Several things that Lucas didn't make sense to me. One was, why didn't he divert the ash and trash when you get on a hot LZ, because they're in the way.
Mm-hmm.
They're not part. It's just stuff that's in the way. You don't need them. Divert those two things. We can reschedule it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I have to leave that, like me being green in the on Birch's garden, and it was. He'd been in country 6 months,
Mm-hmm.
but he hadn't been.
He had no combat experience, and he was not a ground combat commander.
He was good about wanting you to have your clothes ironed.
Yeah.
And that was one of the issues he and I had. They decided that we could always, they washed our clothes. We could send our clothes in for laundry and be
Mhm.
washed, because they had clean clothes, but they're wrinkled, all right? So they decided they could iron clothes. They could do 10 sets for the battalion. So he gave it over to the sergeant major. The sergeant major did the staff and the first sergeants. Staff, I don't know if including the company commanders
Mhm.
and the first sergeants, all right? But that left the artillery liaison out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you got to go to your battalion. He's got the same problem you got. He's already got that done over there, all right?
Mm-hmm.
well, you could iron them. I ain't ironing them, okay? That's not gonna happen. It didn't happen. But that was one of the things. All right, so now I'm, like I said, I've always been kind of a slob, but anyway, I'm not walking around in ironed fatigues, right? And the rest of these people are, because now they got that.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of the things that, one of our points of contention. When I told him that when we were doing the planning for this mission, we went up and met with the Arvins, Dong Ha, I believe. And he was talking with the Arvin commander, and he was talking about ammunition. So, well, we need more ammunition. And so Lucas volunteers to give him some of ours. I said, sir, you can't give those to him. Well, I'm allocated so many rounds, and I can give him some of that. I said, sir, you're allocated, but it belongs to that battery commander down there that has it.
Mm-hmm.
You're allocated it for your use, but you can't give it away. He didn't like that.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't understand. Maybe he did understand. It's too. Never mind.
Mm-hmm.
But that was so. Then he got ordered to go to the field, move out. We moved out to Gladiator.
Mm-hmm.
He got ordered to go out there, and we got our packs down. We got our packs in the tuck. We're going out the next morning to have our packs in there that night. And when I came through Central Issue, you were issued 2 canteens. Well, I got one regular canteen with canteen cup, the whole thing, and the other one I got was a 2-quart canteen. It had a cover and had a strap, and also could be put on the belt. But that's what I was issued. So I had that hanging on. I had my canteen on my web belt, but I had that on my pack. He decided he wanted it. He liked it. Well, I'll get you one. Well, there wasn't any to get, okay? So I go back, and there's my pack without my canteen on it. He's got my canteen. They took my canteen and gave it to Lucas. I wasn't real thrilled with that, okay? You have to think about the situation too. You're in Vietnam, what else are they gonna do to you?
Mm-hmm.
They're not gonna shoot at you in jail. Anyway.
Yeah. All right. Now this tape is about up.
Okay.
So I'm going to stop it here.
You might say Lucas and I didn't see eye to eye.